Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Listen, if you're the kind of focused learner who loves dissecting how things work just beneath the surface, you are in for a massive treat. Today, we're basically putting on our trench coats and acting as linguistic detectives. We are hunting for ghosts. Specifically, we're going to track down how modern Italian, that beautiful flowing language, was fundamentally shaped by the loss, the adaptation, and the hidden leftovers of ancient Latin. It's a crazy story of structural collapse and brilliant reconstruction, and we're going to map the whole thing out together.
Okay, let's dive into this because this central mystery is literally the foundation of our entire investigation. Latin was famous for having this incredibly intense, complex grammar system, right? It was packed with case endings and shifting syllables that told you exactly what a word was doing in a sentence. But if you look at modern Italian, that elaborate case system is basically gone. Poof. So where did it go? Did it just vanish into thin air? And more importantly, how did Italian manage to survive, let alone thrive, without it? Well, let's follow the evidence. To solve this, we've got to start right at the scene of the crime. Section 1, the missing Latin syllables.
Let's just compare the ancient directly to the modern. Take the Latin word for wolf, specifically in the accusative case, which just means it's the direct object of a sentence. That word is lupum. Now, over centuries of spoken, everyday language development, a massive structural shift happened. Speakers simply stopped pronouncing the ends of the words. They just dropped those final syllables. The final M in lupum was completely lost to history, and that heavy U softened into this bright, open O, giving us the modern Italian lupo. Now, this wasn't an overnight thing, obviously. It was a slow, generational erosion of the language's absolute foundation. Now, you might be thinking, so what? Words got shorter. But dropping those final syllables had massive consequences. You can't just chop off the end of a Latin word and expect the grammar to stay the same. Why? Because those final syllables were the case endings. So as those sounds vanished, the entire Latin case system collapsed right along with them. But hey, language always adapts. In the wake of this huge loss, we see the birth of the standard modern Italian singular endings we know today. The language essentially standardized around three primary rock-solid vowel endings, O, and A. That complex, intimidating grid of Latin declensions totally flattened out into these modern Italian markers. But here's the thing. This violent chopping off of syllables actually left some literal scars on language. And that brings us to a fascinating concept known as parole tranche. In English, that translates to truncated words. When certain Latin words lost their original endings, the natural bouncing rhythm of the word was violently disrupted. The stress, or the accent, which used to be safely nestled right in the middle of the word, suddenly found itself hanging right on the very edge, entirely on the final syllable. Let's look at some super concrete examples of this. Take città, which means city, and gioventù, meaning youth. See those heavy accent marks on the final a and u? Those aren't just there to tell you how to pronounce it. They're historical markers. They are the actual linguistic ghosts of the syllables that used to be there in Latin. Because the ends were abruptly truncated, the accent now rests heavily and permanently on that final vowel. It's a direct, highly visible consequence of that ancient phonetic shift.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Latin didn't just disappear. No, it went underground into the syntax itself. While the physical accusative case endings fell off, the logical structure of the accusative survived perfectly in certain sentence frameworks. Think about common verbs of perception. Vedere to see, sentire to hear or feel, ascoltare to listen. In Italian, when you use a direct object plus an infinitive after these specific verbs, that direct object, the historical accusative, actually acts as the logical subject of the infinitive verb's action. The structure itself is just a pure Latin fossil, perfectly preserved in the way modern sentences are built today.
All right, let's keep moving. Section 2, replacing cases with prepositions. So here we see another massive structural shift. In Latin, to use the genitive case, which is how you show ownership or material, like saying the book of the boy or a statue of marble, you would physically change the ending of the noun itself. But as we've established, those endings eroded away. So what did Italian do? Well, it shifted the heavy lifting completely away from the noun and handed the job over to a tiny but mighty preposition, di. Today, the relationships of possession, characteristics, or material are managed entirely by this little word. The noun stays exactly the same, and di does all the grammatical work the genitive case used to do. Pretty clever, right?
But wait, because there is a huge twist in our detective story here. Section 3, restoring the lost roots.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is this idea of restaurazione, restoration. Think about these three incredibly common, everyday, irregular Italian verbs: bere, to drink; dire, to say; and fare, to do. In their infinitive forms, they look super short, highly truncated, almost as if they've completely lost their Latin base. But the absolute magic happens when you actually conjugate them. To say I drink, you don't say bero, no, you say bevo, pulling directly from the ancient Latin bibere. I say is dico, from the Latin dicere. I do is faccio, from facere. When they're forced into action through conjugation, these verbs act like fossils, magically restoring their lost ancient Latin base right before our eyes.
And this brings us to the absolute climax of our explainer. Section 4. Ghosts of the neuter gender. Okay, so if you open up any Italian textbook in the world today, you will learn a very clear, fundamental rule. Modern Italian has exactly two grammatical genders, masculine and feminine. That is the whole shebang. The Latin neuter gender, that ancient third category, officially died out. It's gone. But is it really? Or did it just find a very, very clever place to hide? Let's see how this builds into an incredible grammatical magic trick. There is a very specific group of nouns in Italian that act completely normal in the singular. They end in O, and they are strictly masculine. But when you make them plural, they don't take the normal masculine E ending. Instead, they magically transform into feminine nouns ending in A. Why? Because that A is the exact direct inheritance of the ancient Latin neuter plural ending. The neuter gender didn't vanish at all. It just disguised itself as a feminine plural. Let's walk through some everyday examples, just so you can see this ghost hiding in plain sight. Take the word for egg, uovo. It's masculine singular. But if you want to make an omelet, you need uova, which is feminine plural. The exact same thing goes for paio, becoming paia for pairs, milio becoming milia for miles, and centinaio becoming centinaia for hundreds. Literally every single time an Italian speaker counts eggs or miles today, they are unknowingly summoning the ancient Latin neuter gender. It is built right into the daily fabric of the language. And if you think that's wild, it actually gets even more complex. Section 5. Two plurals, two meanings. So the crucial point is that for certain root words, Italian actually kept both plural forms. Think about that. It kept the regular modern masculine plural ending in E, and it kept the ancient Latin neuter plural ending in A, which acts feminine. But here's the genius part. It split the meaning. The feminine A form is now used to describe collectives or organic, natural units. Meanwhile, the masculine plural form is used to describe individual objects, distinct pieces, or even metaphorical meanings. It's an incredibly precise, razor-sharp semantic tool.
Let me paint a picture for you to make this concrete. Let's take the root word braccia, meaning arm. If you were talking about human arms, an organic, natural pair, you use the feminine collective braccia. But if you were talking about the arms of a river or the mechanical arms of a lever, you use the masculine individual plural, bracci. The exact same thing happens for dito, meaning finger. Dita refers to the fingers collectively making up your hand. But if you are counting distinct, individual fingers, maybe pointing out different ones, you use diti. It's one root word creating two totally different visual realities, all thanks to a Latin ghost.
Consider our final examples here. Osso means bone. If you say ossa, the collective, you are talking about human remains, a full skeleton. But if you say ossi, the individual, you are talking about a distinct individual bone, like the kind you might throw to a dog. And look at fundamenta. Fundamenta refers to the actual physical collective foundation holding up a building. But fundamenti, that refers to the individual theoretical basics or principles of a science. This ancient Latin leftover enables incredibly fine semantic distinctions today. It's absolutely not just a quirk, it's a brilliant feature of modern Italian.
So, we've seen how truncated words, shifting prepositions, and hidden neuter plurals completely mapped the DNA of Italian. But I want to leave you with a thought as we wrap up this explainer. Languages don't ever stop evolving. Not ever. So what is your language shedding? Which syllables and grammatical rules is your own native language actively shedding right this very second? When we speak quickly and drop our word endings, we are doing exactly what the ancient Romans did. What linguistic ghosts are we leaving behind for future detectives to find 1,000 years from now? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep questioning everything, and I will catch you in the next explainer.